In this tutorial, we will start on designing the return air system for the zones that we have inside the second floor. So if we go to the first zone, we will find that we have that VAV box that controls the airflow through it, and that VAV box has an output and it has an input. So this input for the input supplying air and this output for the output supplying air, and this input is going for the return air, not the supplying air. So what we will do now is to go out of that VAV box with a duct, and this duct will be connected to the return diffusers for that space and for the other spaces in that zone. But the problem that will face us is that when we go out of that VAV box with a duct, this return duct will have the same offset of that supplying duct. So if there is an intersection between the supplying duct and the return duct, they will have the same offset and then they will interfere together. And for that purpose, we need to make the usual trick, which is to increase or decrease the offset of the return duct. So if we change it, the offset of the return duct, generally, we will have no problem as it will not interface anyway with the supplying duct. And the plan that we have now for routing the return duct is to go out of the VAV box with a duct at that direction, then we go at that direction here, and then we go forward at that direction to feed all of the spaces that we have. But the problem that will face us here is that this forward distance may be a narrow distance for the return duct to go through it. And for that, we need to shift the position of that diffuser and that one. So we can select that diffuser and then press on a line, and then we save the project and we align that line here with that edge of the diffuser. Very good. We do the same thing for that line here, and we align it with that edge of the diffuser. Now we will insert the return duct, and for that we select that VAV box and press on that tab to insert the duct, and we will insert it until that position only. So until that position, you can see the duct has an offset of 3,150 millimeter, which is the same offset of that duct, which is 3,150 millimeter. So what we will do now is to select that return duct and then press right click and then draw duct. But for the duct that we will draw now, we will increase its offset so we can make it to P 3,550 millimeter instead of 3,150 millimeter. Now we can go until that position here and then we go there. So let's go forward to that position, but you can see we cannot draw a duct at that position. This is because this duct is very near to that main duct or that duct that is going out of the air handling unit. So we can press on escape and then skip another time. And then a good solution is to select that VAV box and we can shift it left here by pressing on the left arrow on the keyboard. So we can shift it to that position and then we can decrease the length of that duct. So we can drag it left here and then we can select those ducts and then we can press a move and start moving them from that point and then we connect them to that point. More than great. Now we do the same thing. We press right click and then draw a duct. And let's draw the duct to that position. You can see we can draw the duct now. We have no problem. This is because of the offset between that return duct and that air handling unit duct is sufficient now to draw the return duct. So we can draw it easily at that position. And then we can go there. Here we can go forward to insert the duct until the last space that we have as the return duct or the main return duct will enter all these spaces to absorb the air out of all the return diffusers that we have. Also, the second notice that we can distinguish easily between the return duct and the supplying duct with their color. So the supplying duct are in blue and the return ducts are on the cyan color. Now to express that we have just done and to see the coordination between the supplying ducts and the return ducts to ensure that we have no problem or no interference between the supplying and the return ducts, we can access that section easily by pressing double click on it. And here we go. You can see we have a sufficient offset generally between the return duct and the supplying duct. And for that, the return duct can go at any way through these spaces and there will be no interference between it and the supplying duct as we have increased the offset of it to have a free space between it and the supplying ducts. Very good. Now we close that section. All right, now what we need to do is to design the return air system for that first space, and it will have the same idea for the supplying air system. So we will have the same number of diffusers with the same airflow. So we have here 4 diffusers, and each of them is rated 200 liter per second. So we can insert another diffuser. We press on the air terminal, and then the little thing that will be changed is that, and instead of the supplying diffuser, we will choose the return diffuser. So we press on the return one, and now we change its offset to P 2600 millimeter, and then we insert it at that position, and after that we can select it and press and copy, and start copying it from that point, for example, and insert another one at that position, and also a third one. We copy it here from that point, and we insert it at that position. And finally, a fourth one, we select that one and copy it, and we pick it from that point, and we can insert it at that position. Now you can see we may have an interference between the VAV box and the air terminal that we have. So we can select the VAV box and shift it up a little bit. Very good. Now what we will do is to align the air terminals that we have with these slabs or with these square slabs. So we select that air terminal, for example, and then we press on align, and then align it with that line here, that edge, and then that edge with that line. And also the same thing for that one, and here that one with that edge, and that fourth one, we align it also, and that edge with that edge, and the same thing for that fourth one, here that one with that edge. More than great. Now after aligning the air terminals that we have, let's go to the routing operation. So we go to the System tab, and then Duct, and start making the duct from that point to that point, and then another one here from that point to that point, and a third one here from that point to the center of the air terminal, and another one here from that point till the center of the air terminal. Very good. You can see we have created the return air system in addition to the supplying air system, and we distinguish between them easily. The return air system has some air terminals and some ducts with the cyan color, but for the supplying one, they are in blue. Now we do the same thing for the second space. Here it needs 3 return air terminals, and if we select that one, we find that it's 200 liter per second. So it needs 3 return air terminals. Each of them is rated 200 liter per second. And for that, we select that air terminal, and we press and copy, and we start copying it from that point, and let's insert it at that point. And then we insert another one, so we press and copy, and copy it from that point, and let's insert it at that point. And also a third one, we press and copy it from that point, and we insert it at that point. Very good. Now what we will do is to connect the air terminals as usual with the return duct. So we press and duct, and then we start from that point till that point, and the same thing, we go out of the main duct with another duct and till that point, and it's connected to that air terminal. And finally, another printed duct from that point to that point. So let's apply the second space that we have for the return air system. Now let's move to the third space. Here it requires 2 air terminals, and if we select each one of them, we will find that they are rated 235 liter per second. And for that, we select that air terminal and press and copy, and start copying it from that point, and then let's insert it at that position, for example, and then another one, we copy it from that point, and we insert it at that position. But it will be a good idea to increase their offset a little bit, so we select that one and press Control and that one, and press on Align, and align them with that line, here that one, and also the same thing, we select that line and that one. Very good. This is a good position for the 2 return air terminals. Then we go to the System and Duct, and start from that point till that point, and the same thing from that point till that point. So let's apply the return air system for that space, and then if we select the 2 air terminals, we will find that their airflow is exactly 235 liter per second. But if we select the rest of the air terminals, we find that their airflow is 235 liters per second. So we have a mistake here. We forgot to change the air terminals for the return ducts. And for that, we will select all of the return ducts as for those two spaces, the airflow, as we said, is 200 liters per second only. So we select all of them. And finally that one, and change their airflow to be only 200 liters per second, exactly as the supply system airflow. So by that way, we managed to design the return airflow for those spaces, and we can see what we have done in the 3D form to imagine it well. So we can select all of that and press on the selection box, and then let's drag it here. So we have the return ducts and the supplying ducts. Now let's go to the first space, for example. If this is what we said, we have the return ducts air system with a higher offset than the supply air system. So if we go there, we will find that exactly this duct has a lower offset than that duct. And by that way, we can make the routing operation with no interference between the supplying duct and the return duct. If we increase the offset for the interference position, or we increase the offset for the return ducts generally to overcome the intersecting condition. In this tutorial, we will continue our design about the return air system for the first zone that we have, which is that zone. As in the previous tutorial, we ended with constructing the return duct system for those three spaces here, the first space and that second one and the third one. And now let's start with the fourth space that we have to construct its return air system. So if we see it needs 3 air terminals, and if we specified any one of them, we will find that its required airflow here. If we drag the tab, the required airflow is 230 liters per second. And for that, we will use other 3 air terminals, but of the return type, and each of them is rated 230 liters per second. And I have a good idea of how they design, which is that we can put the 3 return diffusers at those positions here to P in the front of the supplying diffusers. But at first, let's do a little PT thing, which is to drag the duct right here. So if I select the duct and I press on the right arrow, I'm dragging it right here. And also we can shift those 3 diffusers right. So if I go to the modify tab and I press on align, then I can align that edge of the diffuser to that line, for example. So I press on that line and then that edge. And the same thing here, I press on that line and that edge, and also that line and that edge. Very good. Now we can put the return diffusers at that space. So I press the double escape, and then I can select that air terminal or that return air terminal, and then copy. We start copying it from that point, and we insert it at that point, and then we copy it also from that point. Let's paste it here, and the same thing, we copy it from that point and we paste it here. More than great. Now what we will do is to extend a branched duct from that main duct here. So we go to the system tab and then duct, and we can extend it from that point here up there until that point. Very good. Now we can do the same thing, another duct from that point to that point, and a third one from that point to that point. So that's about the return system for that space. And also we can select those air terminals, and then we can change their airflow to be only 230 liters per second as the supplying system, and that's it. Now let's move to the fourth space. Here we will do the same thing exactly as what we did on the third space. So we can drag the duct right here by pressing on the right arrow on the keyboard, and then we align those 3 diffusers with that line, for example. So we go to the align tab and then align those 3 diffusers with that line, for example. So we press on that line and that edge of the diffuser and the same line and that edge, and also the same line and that edge of the diffuser. Very good. Now we are ready to make the return system by the same way, but at first let's extend the duct a little bit. So we extend its length, and then we copy them. So we select the diffusers and the duct, and then we press and copy and start copying them from that point, and we can paste them at that point here. Very good. We have designed now the return air system for that space very easily by only the copy and the paste command. Also, we need to check the airflow required for those air terminals. Here, if I select that supply one, we find that it needs 235. So we will select those 3 return diffusers and change their airflow to P 235 instead of 230. Very good. Now what is remaining for us is only the last space. So it's a very simple design. It needs only one diffuser that is rated 235. And for that, I'll select that one. And I press and copy and start picking it from that point. And I can paste it here easily. And then I'll extend the duct. So I press right click and then draw duct. And let's start moving until that point and then until that point. So let's have the return air system for that space or for that lunchroom. And by that way, we have ended constructing the supply and the return air system for the first zone. And this tutorial will continue designing the return air system. But now we will start with the second zone that we have. And for that, the first thing we need to do is to go out of the VAV box with the return duct. So this is the input terminal to the return duct. And for that, we will press on that tab to go out of it with the required return duct. Here we can go until that point, and then we can move up. After that, we can go there. But you can see we have the same problem that faces us, which is that this return duct faces or it interferes with that supplying duct. And to overcome this problem or to overcome this intersecting area, we need to reduce the offset of the return duct at that position only or at that area until we overcome that bridge or that distance. And then we return back with the same offset or the original offset. And for that, instead of making the offset to P3150 millimeter, we can change it to P2750 millimeter, 2700. Very good. Now we can start from that point onto that point here. And then what we will do is to connect that duct with the original offset or the higher offset with that duct with the lower offset. So we go to that duct and press a right click and then draw duct and then connect it to that port. Very good. Now we will do the same thing. We draw a duct, but with the original offset, which is that offset. And then we start from that point until that point here. And then we will go up. So we need to go up with the main return duct to absorb the air from all of the zones that we have for that space. So we can go up until that point. Very good. Now we press on escape. And then we go back and let's move that duct a little bit to the left. All right. Now to see what we have made, we can select that part and then press on the selection box. And here let's zoom in. Very good. As you see, we managed to do it exactly. Here the return duct goes at the intersecting area with a lower offset. You can see this is the lower offset, so we have no interference between the return duct and the supplying duct, and then it continues its movement with the same or the original offset. Very good. Now we press on close. And at that point, after inserting the main duct that we have, we need to insert the return air terminals. And for that, let's start with that dam space here. So if we think a little bit, we will find that that space needs 4 return air terminals, and each of them is rated exactly as the supply 235 liter per second. So what we will do is to copy that air terminal. For example, we press and copy, and we start picking it from that point, and then we can paste it at that position. And the same thing also, we copy it from that point and let's insert it at that position. So we zoom in and insert it at that point. Very good. Now we do the same thing. So we can copy the couple of the diffusers at the same time. We select that one and press and control and select that one, and then press and copy and start copying them from that point. And then we paste them at that point. Very good. So let's about the return air system. And now we need to connect them from the main duct here or from the main return duct. So we can go to the duct tab, and then we can go out of that main duct with a branched duct that is going here. And then we can move left a little bit until that point. And then we connect it with a dead duct. Now we will do the same thing, but first, to decrease the confusion, let's move that tag right here, and then we connect it also with that air terminal. So we go to the system tab and then duct and start from that point to that point. And then we need to connect that duct with that air terminal and that one. So what we will do is to go out of that branched duct with another branch, but we face the same problem, which is that we have that supplying duct that will interfere with that return duct. And for that reason, we will decrease the offset of that return duct at that area also. So we can increase the offset now to P, as we have made before in the VAV box main duct. So we made it here to P 2750 millimeter. And then we move on to that point to overcome that supplying duct. And after that, we can return back to the main offset, which is 3150 millimeter here until that point. And then we can move here to that duct, and then we can connect it to that return duct. And also the same thing, we connect that return duct to that return diffuser. More than great. Here, by that way, we have managed to connect the return ducts that we have to the return diffusers. And if we see that part on the 3D form to imagine it whole, that's good. You can find that this is the offset that we have made, or that we have changed it to P 2750 millimeter. And this is the original offset, 3150 millimeter. So this is to overcome that supplying duct. And those are the two other diffusers that we have. And those four diffusers, that one and that one, and the third one and that fourth one, are the supplying diffusers. All right, now let's close that. And the final thing we need now is to design the return air system for that space here. So it requires 3 air terminals, or 3 return air terminals, and each of them is rated 290 liter per second. So if we copy that air terminal, for example, we select it and press and copy and start picking it from that point. Then we can paste it at that position. There we go there. And insert it at that position. And also we can copy that one. Here we press and copy and insert it at that position. And the same thing, we press and copy from that point and we insert it at that position. Very good. Now we can connect them with the return main duct. So we press on system and then duct, and it asks us if we need to save the project. So we press on save, and here we connect that branched duct with that air terminal, and the same thing from that point to that point, and finally from that point to that point. More than great. So that's about the second space return airflow system. And don't forget to change the airflow setting as we need. So we select that air terminal and that diffuser and the third one, and we change them here to P 290 liter per second. Very good. So that's about this tutorial at which we have constructed the return air system for those two spaces, and we have learned how to overcome the intersecting areas. In this tutorial, we'll continue designing the return air system for the second zone that we have. So the next space that we have now is that instruction room, and it needs, as usual, 3 air terminals or 3 return air terminals, and each of them is rated, as you see, 170 liter per second. And for that, we can easily copy that air terminal. We press and copy and start picking it from that point, and then we can paste it at that point, and then copy again and picking it from that point to that point, and the same thing, copy from that point to that point. So those may be the positions of the 3 air terminals that we have. And then we start the routing operation for them from the main duct with 3 branched ducts. So we go to the ducts and then save the project and start from that point to that point, and then another one from that point to that point, and a third one from that point to that point. And then we will change their airflow settings. So we select one and press and control and select the second one, and still pressing and control and select the third one. And then we can make them to be 170 liter per second. Very good. So that's about this instruction rule. Now the next space we have is that media review room, and that media review room needs only 2 earth terminals, and each of them is rated only 130 loader per second. So we can copy that earth terminal. Here we select it and press and copy, and let's pick it from that point, and we can paste it at that point here, and then another one, we can copy that one from that point to that point. But it will be better if we shift those two return terminals a little bit to the right, so we can go to the Modify tab and select the Align command and align that line with that edge and that line with that edge. Very good. Now what we will do is to connect those two air terminals with 2 branched ducts. So we go to the System tab and press in ducts, and then start from that point to that point, and another one from that point to that point. Very good. That's about the media review space. Let's check now the airflow. Here we select that one and control and that one, and change their airflow to P as the supply, 130 liter per second. Very good. Now let's move to the last space that we have inside that zone, which is that space that requires 2 air terminals, and each of them is rated 150 liter per second. So we can select the air terminal and press and control and select that second one. And then we press and copy and start picking them from that point. And let's insert them here. So we can insert them at that point. Very good. Now we press on the duct to make the branched duct from that point to that one and another one. But at first, let's drag that duct a little bit down, and then we press a right click and draw duct, and let's move up until that point. Then we move on to that point. So it's more better design here to have that alcove. As we learned it before, it makes the airflow more easier, or it decreases the disturbance, and instead of making the 90-degree angles here. Now we change the airflow, so I select that one and make it to be 150 and instead of 130. All right, so that's about the second zone. Here we have finished designing its return duct system for that first space, that second one, that third one, that fourth one, and that fifth one. Now let's move to the last zone we have, that which is the third zone, and at that time we will start constructing its return air system. Here, if we select it, we will find that this is the input terminal for the return duct. So I can easily press on that square to go out of it with the duct that will go forward to feed all the zones that we have. So I can go onto that point and then move right here. So this main duct will absorb all the return airflow from all the return diffusers at the same manner as what we have did on the last 2 zones. Very good. Now we press on double escape. And now let's start making the return system for those 2 last spaces. This conference space, it needs 3 air terminals. If we see, each of them is rated 220 liter per second. And for that, we will copy and return diffuser. So I can copy that one, for example. I pick it from that point, and then I move it up onto that point here. So let's paste it at that point. And then I can copy it also. So I press and copy and pick it from that point, and I paste it here. And the same thing, copy from that point to that point. Now we can make the branching duct system here from that point till that one, and another one from that point till that point, and a third one, but let's make it to be with an elbow. So we drag this down here, and then right click and draw ducts. And as usual, we end at that point and connect it to that one. Very good. Now we can change the airflow through them. So I select that one and that second one and that third one, and I make them to be exactly at the supply airflow. So it's 220 liter per second. Now for the second space, it needs also 2 diffusers, but each of them at that time is rated 130 liter per second. So I can copy that one, press and copy, and start picking it from that point. And I can paste it at that point here. So let's paste it here. And then another one. So I copy that one, press and copy, and start picking it from that point. and I insert it at that point. Very good. Now we connect those two return ducts with the main duct. Here we go to the System tab and press in duct and start making it from that point to that point. So it gives us an error now telling us that we cannot draw like that duct as it's very near to the air terminal. So what we will do now is to press an escape, and then we can change the designing strategy. So I can select that air terminal and press and move and start picking it from that point. And for example, I can paste it at that point. And also I can change the position of that one. I press and move and start picking it from that point. And I paste it at that point. Very good. Now we press on duct again to connect them. I connect it to that point, and the same thing, we press on duct again. And again, I go with the duct from that point to that point. So it tells us also we have a problem here. Now we press on cancel. And what we will do now is to select that air terminal and then press on a line and align that line with that line. So we shift that diffuser a little bit up, and also we shift that diffuser a little bit up. So we select that line and that edge of the diffuser. Now, if we try to make the duct system by pressing the system and duct, answer from that point here. So we have the same problem now, press and cancel, and then we can select the diffuser and press on a line and align it with that line here. So that H to that line. And then we can go to the System tab again and press and duct and start from that point and go there until that point. So that's about the design of that advisor space. Here, what we wanted to say is that you may face some problems during your design, so you make the required modification to make the design go well as much as possible. So that's about this tutorial at which we have constructed the return airflow for those two spaces. And on the next tutorial, we will finish the return air system for the last zone that we have. And this tutorial, we will continue our design of the return air system for the third zone that we have to finish it. So on the previous tutorial, we have finished the designing process of those two spaces, and now let's continue with the rest of these spaces, which only those two spaces, this administration room and this open space area. And if we start with that administration room, we will find that it's as usual needs two air terminals, and each of them is rated 215 liters per second. And for that, we will select the diffuser and press and copy. So we pick it from that point, and let's insert it here. And then another one. So we press and copy again and copy that one from that point. And let's insert it here. Now we go to the duct system and save the project. And then we start from that point and connect it to that diffuser. And another one from that point to that diffuser. Very good. Now we change their airflow. So we select both of them and change it to P 215. And that's it. Now the last space we have is that open office. So if we need to go out of that VAV box with a main duct that is going forward to feed that open space, one strategy is that we go up here and then we move to the left. But as usual, we will face that supplying air duct. And for that, we will do the same trick, which is to reduce the offset of the return duct at that area only to overcome that supplying air duct. So let's do that plan here with present duct and start from that point. Then we go there until that point, and now we end at that point. And then we decrease the offset to be only 2,750 liters per second. And then we go until that point. Here we overcome the supplying air duct, and then we increase the offset again. So we make the offset pack 3,150 millimeter, and then we can go until that point here. Very good. Now we press on escape, and let's shift the duct a little bit down here. Now, not to confuse ourselves, let's drag that tag up here, and then we will insert our return air terminals. So I select that air terminal, and then I press and copy, and start copying it from that point, and then I can paste it at that position, and also another one, we select it and press and copy, and I start picking it from that point and I insert it at that position and another one. So we can pick that one and press and copy and select it from that point. And let's insert it at that position. For example, as you see, we need 5 return air terminals to P equal to the 5 supplying air terminals. Here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have inserted 1, 2, 3. We need other 2 air terminals. And for that, we press and copy again and select it from that point. And let's paste it at that position. So those are 4 air terminals. And we need the last one. So we can copy that one again, press and copy and select it from that position. And we ended that point here. So let's insert that at that position. More than great. Now let's start the routing operation. So I'll press on the system and then dot, and then we start from that point, end of that point, and another one from that point till that point. And we need a third dot, so we start from that point, for example, and go there, and then we go there until that point, and then we end at that point. Very good. Now the last diffuser we have is that one. So we go from that point here onto that point. Very good. Now we have that last diffuser. Then we draw another duct. So we press in duct and start from that point until that point. Very good. Now we can decrease the extension of that duct. So we do need some useless extensions of the duct. So we can drag it right here and then press and cap up and ins to cap it. Very good here. That's the return air system. And what we will do now is to change the airflow setting for each of them to be exactly as the supply airflow. So for that supplying duct, we need 195. And for that, we select that return duct and press and control and select the second one, the third one, the fourth one, and finally the fifth one. And then we change then from 2015 to 195, and that's it. So that's about the final zone that we have for the return air supplying system. And also we can check it in the 3D4. So if I select that zone here, and then I press on the selection box, you can see this is our system for the supplying and for the return ducts. This is the input duct that is going forward from the main duct from the air handling unit. If you remember, it's going with the supplying air, and then we have that return air duct. So this is the return air duct that we had just created from the previous tutorial, and this is a branch from it, and this is the trick that we have made, which is to change the offset of the return duct to overcome the interference with the supplying duct. And then we go there with that return duct to feed that air terminal and that second one. And here, if we go there a little bit, we find that we have also that branch duct to feed those featured air terminals. But for the supplying air terminals, we have that one and that second one, that third one, that fourth one, and the fifth one for that space. And those are terminals for the second space, and those one for the third space, and those one for the last space. So that's about this tutorial, at which we have finished the return air system ducts, and we have completed our view for the supplying system and for the return system.